We're so grateful for the opportunity to worship together today. If you don't know me, my name is Rachel. We will be celebrating communion a little later in our service, so we encourage you to prepare some crackers and some juice at home so that we can partake in this together. Let's worship at this time.
Set all the captives free. Spring up a well, spring up a well, spring up a well in me. Nothing can stop this joy. We're dancing in the streets. Spring up a well, spring up a well, spring up a well in me.
Hey, welcome back. I'd love to share with you about a few things that are happening in the life of our community. You can stay up to date on everything we're doing by keeping up with our events page at churchon5.ca, as well as our Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all those things. So we're still holding outdoor services on the back field on Sunday mornings, weather permitting. We would love to have you if you are comfortable coming, so you can find all the information and registration at our website. We also have Food for Life takeout meals on Wednesday and Thursday. If you would love to help us serve the community, why don't you write into our office? It's a great way to get involved in pouring back in. And of course, if you know anyone who needs a meal, please spread the word. That's what we're here for. Thank you so much for those of you who faithfully give and pray and serve as part of our church. We are living the way of Jesus for the life of the city. This is the mission that Jesus has given us, and you can give financially online or here at the office drop box. Let's continue to worship in this time.
Before I call, before I ever cry, answer me from where the thunder hides. I can't outrun this heart I'm tethered to. With every step, I collide with you. Like a tidal wave crashing over me, rushing in to meet me here. Your love is fierce, like a hurricane that I can't escape, tearing through the atmosphere. Your love is fierce, cannot fail. The only thing I found is through it all, you never let me down. You don't hold back, relentless in pursuit. Every turn, I come face to face with you. Like a tidal wave crashing over me, rushing in to meet me here. Your love is fierce, like a hurricane that I can't escape, tearing through the atmosphere. Your love is fierce. You chase me down, see me out. How can I be lost when you have called me found? Chase me down, seek me out. How can I be lost when you have called me found? Chase me down, seek me out. How can I be lost when you have called me found? Like a tidal wave over me, rushing in to meet me here. Your love is fierce, like a hurricane that I can't escape, tearing through the atmosphere. Your love is fierce. Your love is fierce.
Hi, church. We're in our 4th week of the series with All Our Heart, and we're talking about emotional health in regards to our discipleship to Jesus. Discipleship is this process where we want every part of ourselves to be shaped into the image of Jesus and filled with God's holiness and love. And today, I'm not going to lie, we have a difficult topic ahead of us, but it's one that is so important, maybe even more important now than it would have been a year or two ago. And it's this topic of how do we deal with loss and suffering that enters our lives. So we're going in the deep end today. I don't even have a funny story to kick us off. We're just going to dive right into the heart of the material. This topic is so meaningful to me right now, just because it's something I've been experiencing, as you probably have, in various ways throughout this past year. And a few months ago, I found myself just in an unexpected place of pain in my life. Someone had invited us to bring our children to a kids program at another church, and it was there sitting in the lobby of one of the churches in our area that I found myself just unexpectedly overcome with pain and grief. And all of a sudden, it just bubbled to the surface. And as I stepped back and tried to process what was going on within me, it was pain at so much loss that is happening right now. The loss of not being able to build our own children's ministry here, which is one of the reasons we came to this church. The loss of not being able to see our family and friends. The loss as I watched my boys run around with kids that they don't know and aren't in relationship with, and thinking of the wonderful community that we had as a church 3 years ago that we moved on from. And I was just overwhelmed in that moment as pain bubbled to the surface. And I thought, oh my goodness, what is this and what is going on? And we all have to face what bubbles to the surface of our life. And our society does not want to deal with pain at all. In fact, the whole goal of Western society is to eliminate pain and suffering wherever possible. And so we deny it, we escape it, we avoid it, we numb out and distract ourselves away from it. And yet, that is not at all how we see Jesus dealing with suffering. In fact, sometimes in our churches, we don't feel that we can show negative emotions or the grief and the pain that we're going through, because we're just told to celebrate that Jesus has won the victory for us. And even in our churches, we can find ourselves unable to express the pain of life. But you know this, don't you? Our lives here on this earth are filled with such joy and yet pain at the same time. And here, over a year into this pandemic, we certainly, many of us are finding ourselves unexpectedly overcome at times with the loss that has entered our life. But whereas we see our society tries to avoid suffering, it sees suffering as an interruption into our otherwise pleasure-filled life. Whereas we see how other faiths and philosophies would say that suffering should be heroically endured, or suffering really doesn't exist, it's an illusion. That's not what Christianity says. Christianity says that suffering is extremely painful, and yet our God can bring good even from our moments of pain, and that it can have meaning even in the midst of suffering. Tim Keller says this, that for Jesus teaches us that suffering and pain can drive us deep like a nail into the love of God, and that it is possible for us to know greater security and greater power because of the pain that we process with our God. On the other side, if we avoid suffering, if we avoid the pain and the loss that enters into our life, we know this, that we carry pain in such a way that rather than being shaped by the love of God and His intention for our life, we are shaped by the pain that we carry and don't know how to process. One story of this is a vivid example of how when we are shaped by pain, we then go on to shape the world around us in pain as well. There was a young boy whose dream it was to be an artist. His father scoffed at this dream and did not support him, was very cold towards him. The boy applied to an art institute in Vienna, and though many of his friends were accepted, he was rejected and told that his work was unsatisfactory. And this turned out to be the defining moment in the life of a man who would come to shape our world, Adolf Hitler. That he did not know how to deal with the anger and the rejection. And in his most famous book, he writes about how the anger and the resentment that filled his life from the rejection of the art school and the coldness of his father, that this came to define him. And the pain that not only shaped his life also shaped our world. You may be thinking that's a drastic example, but the truth is the same. That we either learn to process the pain and the loss that we face in this life, or that pain will shape us and hurt those around us. We see that Jesus, in his very courageous way, he does not deny the power of pain, yet he teaches us to enter into it. And he teaches us that grieving our loss, grieving the pain of this world, which is very real and is at times overwhelming, grieving is the process where we learn to entrust ourselves into the strength and the healing of the Father, even in the midst of the pain that we face. So let's turn to Matthew chapter 26. We're going to look at how Jesus deals with pain in his life. And this is a very profound passage that it would have been easy, you see, for the eyewitness authors of Scripture to edit this out and to say Jesus was a hero. He went strong and stalwart to the cross all the way to the end. But this is such a vivid portrayal of what it is to be human and to wrestle with both the joy of being human and the loss and the pain that is part of the fabric of our world at this time. And we see Jesus processing his pain with the Father. He does not deny it. Even though at times he desires to escape it, he allows the Father into the process. So how do we deal with pain and loss? This is what we're going to study this morning from Matthew 26, starting in verse 36. Jesus has just celebrated his final supper with his disciples. Judas has left on his way to betray Jesus and gather the soldiers, and Jesus takes his remaining disciples and goes to a garden called Gethsemane because his heart is very distressed. His heart is very heavy. He knows he is facing pain and death, both bodily, emotionally, mentally, and he is very distressed in this moment. Then Jesus went with them to the olive grove called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there to pray." He took Peter and James and John, and he became anguished and distressed. He told them, "My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." He went on a little further and bowed his face to the ground, praying, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine." Then he returned to the disciples and found them asleep. He said to Peter, "Could you not watch with me even for 1 hour? Keep watch and pray so that you will not give in to temptation, for the spirit is willing, but the body is weak." Then Jesus left them a second time and prayed, "My Father, if this cup cannot be taken away unless I drink it, your will be done." When he returned to them again, he opened them. He found them sleeping, for they couldn't keep their eyes open. So he went to pray a third time, saying the same things. Then he came to the disciples and said, "Go ahead and sleep. Have your rest. But look, the time has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hand of sinners. Up, let's be going. Look, my betrayer is here." And in the next part of this passage, we see that Judas and the soldiers are approaching to arrest Jesus. What a tender scene as we see Jesus processing his pain with the Father, and he would lead us into this process. So how do we deal with pain and loss in our life? And the first thing that Jesus shows us is that we need to name our pain. You see, grief must be expressed in order for us to move through it. It must be expressed. And there's so many different categories I was thinking of things that we might not even realize that we are carrying. But sometimes you don't know how to articulate it. You just wake up and you feel depressed. You wake up and you feel a pain in your chest. You feel confused in your head. And what is happening? It needs to be processed. See, Jesus doesn't see pain as an obstacle that keeps us from God. Jesus sees pain as a compass that can lead us to God, because God actually wants us to process our pain with Him. And in order to do that, we need to learn to name the pain. I was thinking, as I help put some practical ways to flesh this out in your hands, I was thinking of some different categories of loss that come into our lives that we may not even realize our loss, and yet they may be affecting us in the way that is underneath the surface, and yet every once in a while rears its head and we think, what was that? Was I just having a bad day? What was that? But it's loss in our life that we need to learn how to process with the Father. As we see Jesus doing, you see, Jesus is distressed. He's troubled. Some scholars describe this as Jesus being depressed. Some scholars say this is Jesus having a panic attack. But we see that grief is encircling his soul and crushing it to the point of death. Those are his words. We see that he is throwing himself at the mercy of the Father. He is on his face in front of the Father because he is just broken before him at the pain that is going on in his own soul. And we need to follow Jesus' lead and learn to name our pain. Here's what one scholar said, which I thought was so profound. He said, Jesus' depression in the garden teaches us that one faithful response to depressing situations is depression. And that it does no good when people are in sad, painful circumstances to simply tell them to feel better. They need to be able to express the pain of the situation that they are in. And we see that Jesus does this, that this is a faithful way to deal with our pain. As I was thinking about some of the losses that you might be dealing with, and if you've got a pen and paper or you want to jot notes on your phone, maybe you want to write down these categories of losses, and maybe you want to spend some time praying through these with the Lord this week. But here, as we name our pain, here are some of the categories of losses that might be impacting you right now. The first is the suffering that takes place in our world. And for you, you might be impacted by the injustice that you see, by the shootings that are going on and the racial hate crimes that are taking place all across the world, but especially in Canada and America right now, hitting so close to home. You might be impacted by the poverty, by the hospitals overflowing with COVID patients, the unfairness and injustice that is happening, not to you personally, but here in our city. Or it might be the suffering of personal tragedy that has entered your life. And as that cancer diagnosis is impacting your family, or as that accident has ripped away your hopes and your dreams for your future, that we see that suffering bears pain and loss in such a profound way in our life. And sometimes these losses have layers to them. And there is the pain not only of limitation, not only of losing loved ones, but of dreams of the future that were lost as well. You need to name that pain before God. So there first is the category of loss that I would call suffering. The second category that I would draw your attention to is transition and change. You see, change, even when it is good change, brings loss with it. One time when Chris and I moved from Indiana to New York, we were meeting our new youth group, and we had one of the grade 12 students come up to us, and he was feeling a bit jaded in that moment because he loved the pastor that had just moved on. And he said, "You know what? I'm sure you guys are great people. No offense to you, but I know I have a year left of youth group, but you're not going to really see me, and you're not going to really know me because I've done this before. I was really attached to the last youth pastor, and it's just too painful right now. And here's the truth. Even good and positive change and transition in our life brings loss. Some of the transitions are painful. It could be that a relationship you have is changing. It could be that you thought you were going to be ecstatic to retire, and now, just a few months in, you're missing that place of work that you left. It could be that you've trained up someone in your workplace and you've mentored them and you thought they were going to take over your business, and all of a sudden they've decided to make a change and they've left you. It could be any number of natural transitions in your life that for health reasons you're feeling the pressure to make a change in your current situation. And yet, transition and ending. See, even in the Christian world, we have been taught to think of endings as failures and changes as failures. And yet it is so important for us to recognize that in transitions and endings, there is pain, even when it's positive. And maybe there has been changes going on in your life, whether positive or negative, but they've brought about loss, and you need to unpack that with the Lord. The third category of loss is our season of life. Maybe you're entering the empty nest season and you thought you were going to love it, but you are grieving over missing your children. Many of us, we are in this stage of life where you are losing loved ones, whether it be grandparents or parents, and we are walking alongside them in the final stages of life, and it is such a painful season, and yet it is a season of loss that everyone goes through. And this is just one of the many seasons of life, but we don't talk about this very much. Some of us are the people who are approaching the end of our life. We are dealing with our own mortality and the fact that we all will die. See, seasons of life bring inherent loss, and we need to be able to name that pain, to realize how it's affecting us, and to process it with God. And the fourth category of loss is just the ways in which our own thinking and our own choices, sometimes choices we regret very deeply, our choices have impacted and brought pain and loss into our life. Maybe you regret how you are responsible for some of the ways your life is right now, and you need to be able to name that pain and grieve that loss. See, whether the pain is physical, mental, or emotional, it must be grieved in order for us to move through it. When pain remains unprocessed, we stay stuck in it. And it is meant to be processed with the Lord. We see Jesus doing this, throwing himself at the Father and saying, God, the suffering before me, I feel like it is crushing me. I feel like it is too much to bear. I'm asking you for an escape. And yet at the end of the day, I submit to your will. But let me tell you how I am feeling and processing this pain. Do you know the pain that you're facing today, and can you name it before God? And listen, if this isn't the season that you're in right now, if you don't find yourself facing loss and pain underneath the surface of your life, you will someday. So just remember that this is how we need to approach it, by naming our pain with our Father. Here's the second thing, is that we need to wait in the confusing in-between. This is language from an author named Pete Scazzaro. We need to wait in the confusing in-between, and this waiting period is painful. It is longer than we want it to be so many times. See, we want to move through these places of pain in our own soul. We want to move through them as quickly as possible. Like Jesus, we say, God, if there's any way I can escape this pain, please fix it, deal with it, help me to escape it. And yet, we must wait. We must wait in the confusing in between. We must wait for strength. We must wait for peace. We must wait for direction. We must wait and continue to process the pain until we have moved through it. So many times, especially in these days, I will process my pain with God. And when I wake up the next morning, it's there again, waiting to be processed again. And it's this process of continually coming before the Father and waiting. And this is such a painful process. To me, it feels more like wrestling than like waiting. I don't know if you can identify with that, but some of you, I know you feel like you're wrestling before God right now. That's many times how I feel. And the Lord just spoke to me last weekend and he said, Rachel, you think you can't wait any longer with what is going on beneath the surface of your life, but I'm reminding you not to be captured by the anxiety of our time. Do not be captured by the other voices that would speak into your life. Listen to my voice as the only voice. And remember, you are not just waiting in futility, you are waiting on me. And man, that was what I needed to hear, because like you, I have all kinds of people in my ear giving me advice for how to do my life right now. And I need to listen to the one voice that matters, and that is the voice of Jesus. And he will give us the strength to remember that we are waiting on. Listen, Hebrews chapter 5 says this about the life of Jesus. While Jesus was here on earth, he offered prayers and pleadings with loud cries and tears to the one who could rescue him from death. And God heard his prayers because of his deep reverence for God. Even though Jesus was God's son, he learned obedience from the things that he suffered. See, Jesus learned obedience through suffering. And I know that the pain that is in my life, when I bring this pain and I wait on God in the confusing in between, though it is painful, it is still full of purpose because I am learning obedience. I am allowing God to deal with the pain that is in my life, the other voices that I want to listen to, the pressures that I feel are too much for me to bear. I am allowing him to be greater than all of this. And I know that while I am waiting, he is working. Because if Jesus learned obedience through the things that he suffered, this is the path that is set out for you and I. And in the waiting, we are learning. In the waiting, we are being made holy. We are being discipled into the image of Jesus. So we must wait in the confusing in between for as long as it takes. Here's the third thing we see from Jesus in Gethsemane, is that we must trust in the God of the resurrection. We must trust in the God of the resurrection. We like resurrection in a sermon. It is so much harder to wait for in the reality of our circumstances. We like resurrection when we can be in control of it. But the truth is that in Jesus, all dead things will rise. And that we need to continually place our trust, place our pain, place our future and our hope into the hands of the God who promises that he is working all things for our good. And it's that simple call back to this pure trust in God that is at the center of our faith. And that we believe in the promise of the resurrection while not trying to say the pain that I'm facing isn't painful and doesn't matter. It does matter. And it is overwhelming at times, but our God is greater and he will meet us in our very place of pain. I want to just give you, as we're closing, I want to give you just things that I see that in the confusing in between, these are things that can bring us life. They are things that can be sustaining and life-giving, not only to process our pain with the Father, but two other things in our Christian life that I see here in this passage and that are so important. And the first thing is community. Isn't it significant that here Jesus is asking his disciples to stay awake, asking them to stay attentive. See, if Jesus needs his community around him in times of pain, how much more so do we need the same? There is something so significant. Even secular psychology will tell us about being able to name our losses and name our pain to the people who are close to us, and that we need community and belonging. We need each other. And as I remind you so often, church, that when we are sharing our pain in Christian community, it's our fellow brothers and sisters in Christ who are able to give us the hope of the resurrection while also recognizing the reality of the place that we are in. Let us be a community, not only of the resurrection, but a community where it is okay to grieve. It is okay to lament, where we recognize that pain is a very real part of life and that we must process it with God. But as Jesus needs his community, community in times of pain is such a life-giving thing, especially in this stage of the confusing in between. Here's the second thing, and it is the meaning that God has placed in our life, the mission that he has given us. We all need to live lives of meaning. Here at our church, in the Christian sense, we call that mission, that we are living life with God and on mission for him. But if you are here and you don't know Jesus, I could use the broader word meaning. We need to live lives that are meaningful, and it's meaning that makes us come alive. And something I see, especially with younger generations right now, let's say people who are under 50, is that we're talking about margin and self-care so much, we don't realize that we actually need to be about meaning in our life for us to come alive. See, this is so important in our faith because Jesus says you'll find your true life when you give your life away. And I can't only find life through self-care and margin. I need to be about the mission of Jesus, sharing his love and caring for those around me, both Christian and non-Christian. I need to be about the mission of Jesus in order to come alive. And it's meaning that pulls us out of ourselves when we are in a place of pain. It's serving one another. It's loving one another. It's having something bigger than ourselves, this mission that Jesus has given us to share his gospel through word and deed. And so in the confusing in between, if you find yourself running out of sustaining life, our life always comes from Jesus. He will sustain you and strengthen you. But in the practicals, it's being in community and it's living out of this mission to share Jesus in word and deed. This is what sustains us. It is what gives us life. See, even now in this time, the most alive that you will find me is on a Sunday when I'm here with you, on a Wednesday night when we're serving at Food for Life, and when I'm leading my Bible study. That's the most alive you'll find me because Jesus says you will find your life when you give your life away. This is the way of Jesus. And meaning can be such a sustaining thing in times of pain. As we close our time today, I want to celebrate communion with you. As Jesus tells us to remember, it's our way of recognizing our humanity and the pain that we face, of looking at all Jesus' sacrificed for us, and of also believing and trusting in the God of the resurrection. It's to say, Jesus, my pain was I'm identifying with you in my pain because your body was given for me. Your blood was poured for me. And so, Jesus, I turn to you now. You're my strength. You are my joy. You are the one who will lead me as I walk through all seasons and all stages of life. You are the one who will lead me through. And so as we close out our talk, I want to remember the blood and body of Jesus that was given for us, and to take strength and to draw our strength from him when we have nothing else. He is our center. So Jesus, we thank you. As we celebrate communion together, we thank you for your body that was broken for us and for your blood that was poured out for us. Will you give us strength in the confusing in between and help us to ever trust in the God of the resurrection? At this time, would you take and eat, take and drink of him as we worship one last time together?
Hear the word roaring as thunder, with a new future to tell. For the dry season is over, there is a cloud beginning to swell. To the skies, heavy with blessing, lift your eyes, offer your heart. Jesus Christ, open the heavens, now we receive the Spirit of God. We receive your reign. We receive your reign. Every seed buried in sorrow, you will call forth in its time. You are Lord, Lord of the harvest, calling our hope now to rise. We receive your reign. We receive your reign. We receive your reign. We receive your reign. Like a flood, like a flood, we receive your love when you come. Like a flood, like a flood, we receive your love when you come. Like a flood, like a flood, we receive your love when you come. Like a flood, like a flood, we receive your And with great anticipation, we await the promise to come. Everything that you've spoken will come to pass. Let it be